Hello, my name is Patrick Slaughter, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you about how my rock bottom experience led to personal developments that propelled my life in a direction that I never would have imagined. But first, a little background information. Prior to my rock bottom experience, I was an ass. I expected too much from people. I was mean. I was always getting in fights because I needed to prove how tough I was. I drank alcohol just about every day. I was abusive. Most people where I was from would have figured that I would have ended up dead or in prison by the time I was 25. And if I'm honest, I would have had to agree with them. Nobody really knew why I was the way I was or what had happened, least of all me, but that all changed in the late winter of 1991. I found myself homeless in the streets of Chicago. And I'll admit I was terrified. I was convinced that I was going to freeze to death or that I was going to be brutalized by some lunatic, or worse, I was going to be foraging through dumpsters looking for food. And at the time, I was so brokenhearted and downtrodden that I didn't feel there was any way for me to move forward. And I was so filled with despair, I didn't even want to try. So it was that point that I made the very conscientious decision, I thought, to end my life. Now, if I'm honest, this series of events wasn't unforeseen. I'd seen it coming, and I had planned accordingly. It was during that time that I had a medical condition that required me to take some very potent medicine. It's the kind of medicine they only give you so many pills per week. And my prescribing physician had told me, you better take these exactly as they're prescribed, because if you don't, you could end up injured or possibly even dead. And that's what I was counting on. So for about 3 weeks, I saved up these pills. And then on a fateful Friday, when I decided that had been enough, I was looking for a place to be undisturbed. So I found a suburb, a subdivision that had a lot of construction. And I didn't have a car, so I pulled the car in behind a dumpster. And there I sat. I had about 20 pills or so and a 12-pack of Chicago old-style beer. Yeah, you've had it. It's nasty, I know, but I could get it. And I sat there, and I remember taking one pill after another and following it with beer. And that's what I did until I consumed 20-some pills, and I'd polished off the 12-pack. And then I remember feeling surprisingly warm, which for Chicago is an anomaly. And then I felt a little woozy, and I settled into my jacket. And then I got sleepy, and then I prepared to drift off into oblivion. And then the unexpected happened. I woke up. I woke up to the sound of a police officer tapping her flashlight against my driver's side window. I don't know who was more surprised to find out I was alive, her or me. Now, I'll digress for a minute. If you're going to take advantage of a rock bottom moment, it's important to know when you have hit rock bottom. And I can tell you that as I watched her trundle down the street, I knew absolutely and unequivocally I had arrived. Now, I sat in the car, I had a heck of a hangover and didn't really know what I was going to do. So I decided to go to Magic Incorporated. Magic Incorporated is a famous magic shop that's located in Chicago. It was a long walk. I decided to walk because I needed to save the gas in the car. So I started to walk, and then something happened. As I walked, I got angry. Not angry, I got mad. I was mad as hell. I was mad at my ex-girlfriend for breaking up with me and putting me out on the street to begin with. I was mad at my friends because they weren't supporting me. They wouldn't even let me sleep on their couch. I was mad at my parents because they wouldn't send me money so that I could stay in a hotel. I think I was even mad at God. And then it hit me. So what? Didn't matter how mad I got. All this bad juju that I was wishing on these people was going to have absolutely no effect on their lives as they continue to go about things as normal. I realized that all this venom and vitriol that I was ingesting was kind of like drinking poison, waiting for the other guy to die. And it was right then that I realized that if I was going to get myself out of the mess that I was in, I was going to have to be the one to do it. And that was the first lesson I learned from my rock bottom experience, which was self-reliance. Well, eventually I made it to Magic Incorporated, and I bemoaned of all my problems to Bob Brown, a gentleman who worked there. Now, Bob earned a living by blowing up balloons and twisting them into animal shapes and giving them to tourists for tips. So naturally, he suggested that I should go perform magic on the street for tips. Well, I will tell you, magic was a hobby. I didn't say I was any good. I only knew 5 tricks, and they weren't that great. You've seen the show. But I was desperate. So I took Bob at his suggestion, and I went to Brookfield Zoo. And there I found a location, a place where all the tourists were kind of milling around, and I started yelling, "Free magic show, free magic show." Now I looked up, and about 8 or 9 people were standing around me. It worked. And then I did my 5 tricks. And after I did my 5 tricks, I passed my hat and asked for money. I was a panhandler with a gimmick. Now, you won't imagine how surprised I was when I got my hat back and inside there were $7, 7 whole dollars. And I know that doesn't seem like much, but to me, in my mind, I'd already done the math and figured out if I did about 7 more shows, made about the same amount of money, I should be able to stay in a hotel that night. And if I did 2 more shows after that, I was going to be able to eat. Be McDonald's, but I like McDonald's. Well, thank goodness it was a sunny day, because that's what I did. 10 shows later, I had $83 in my pocket. And that's when I learned the second lesson that I learned from being on the street, and that was work ethic. I realized that I was going to have to be the one to change my life, and to do so, it was going to take a lot of concentrated effort, dare I say work. But I also learned that a series of tiny successes can grow into grand accomplishments. Now, the next lesson I learned from being on the street, a little more complicated, took a little bit longer. See, I said before, nobody really understood why I was the way I was, least of all me. I mean, after all, I came from a pretty good background. Middle-class family, I did well in school, I was reasonably popular, I had hair. That wasn't funny. All sounds pretty good, but what I found out later, all this love and wonderfulness was killing me. It was killing me because it all came with expectations. People expected me to do well. If I got an A on a test, it was expected. If I went to a karate tournament and won, that was expected. What was worse was if I didn't succeed or if I actually failed, my parents were disappointed if I didn't get straight A's. If I went to a karate tournament and lost, I was embarrassed or humiliated. And all these expectations were strangling the life out of me. But when I was here performing on the street, I was free. Nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew where I was from. Nobody had any expectations of me. The only thing that they wanted was for me to do something amazing or make them laugh. I don't know how amazing I was, but I was funny as hell. Well, as I began to revel in this freedom, I started to understand who I was, and I started to learn to like me for me. So I started to take care of myself. I stopped drinking alcohol. I started exercising. I started being nice to people. And then lo and behold, they started being nice to me. And I think that was the most valuable lesson that I learned, was how to be part of a community. Well, there was a lot of other lessons. Don't have time to talk about them all. I didn't always make enough money to sleep indoors, but none of those things I was afraid of ever happened either. I ended up eventually going back to school and I finished my undergraduate degree. I didn't use it. I went on to perform magic for the next 15 years. Eventually grew from street performing to trade shows to resorts and to corporate events. And I was allowed to travel around the world, and I earned a good living, and I was able to semi-retire at the age of 40. It was the worst 2 years of my life. As a result, I ended up going to law school. Go figure. In law school, I did pretty well. I graduated second in my class. And then as I was preparing to sit for the state bar exam, I found out that I was going to have to disclose the entirety of my life, including the circumstances surrounding me being homeless, in the character and fitness application. And I did. And the powers that be were gracious enough to allow me to still sit for the test, and I passed. I'm a lawyer. Not only am I a lawyer, I own a law firm. I have several attorneys and paralegals and support staff that work for me. And they are an amazing group of people. They work with people in family cases who are going through the worst moments of their life. It's hard work, but they do it with style and grace. Every day I'm privileged to work with a group of lawyers and judges who have been gracious beyond means to me, and for that I'm also incredibly grateful. But every day I still apply those lessons I learned from the street. For instance, I know if we want to make $1 million in a year, we need to bill about $83,000 a month, which means we need to take in about $4,200 a day, which means my attorneys have to bill about 5 hours a day. Sound familiar? Now, I'm not homeless anymore. I own 3 and spend my time between 2 different states because I'm allergic to cold. And then after about 9 years of courtship, Zena and I threw caution to the wind and rushed headlong into marriage. We've been together for 17 years, happily married for 8. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, hey, you made it. You survived. You conquered your difficulties. You rose above your circumstances. To which I say, hogwash. I would tell you that I made it because of my time on the street, not despite it. So what's the point? Well, I'm still figuring that out. I'm hoping that if somebody here is going through some kind of rock bottom experience, they can remember this call and it will encourage them to hang on because life changes. I never would have imagined it was even a possibility that I could be here today. I hope it also inspires you to look at the lessons you can learn from your rock bottom experience and apply them to your life. Because I think if you do, you may be shocked in the direction it'll take you. I know I was. Thanks.